Oxford, that sweet city with her dreaming spires, fashioned from the Headington, Cotswold and Bath stone that is the signature of this university's delightful architecture. With such remarkable edifices all about, the city feels like it is almost an eternal permanence. But all about the city, buildings and structures come and go, have been and gone, and whilst when one thinks of Oxford they are unlikely to think of its railways, they have, in their way, shaped this city in sometimes subtle and sometimes far-reaching ways. Oxford is, today, served by 2 railway stations, with the principal station located on the Botley Road adjacent Friedwide Square, with Oxford Parkway located to the city's north. Until 1962, passengers could catch trains westward to Witney and Fairford, or else strike east for Thame, Princes Risborough, High Wycombe and Maidenhead, until services were withdrawn in 1963. Between the railways reaching Oxford in 1844 and the present day, the city was served by a further 13 stations. In this film, we will explore their rise, their fall, and their remains. Our first station is to the city's southeast and served the village of Horsepath. Horsepath Halt was located on the Great Western Railway's Wickham Railway, which ran between Oxford, Thame, Princes Risborough, High Wycombe and Maidenhead. Originally opened between 1908 and 1915, and then again between 1933 and 1963, the station, like others we will encounter, was built to lure passengers away from increasingly popular local buses, and strengthen its own suburban services. Wartime economy measures were responsible for the Halt's first closure, and, when it reopened 18 years later, it did so slightly further west of the original site. With timber platforms, platform signs and a corrugated iron passenger shelter, the station was situated atop the embankment and was accessed by a path here on Cuddesdon Road. Nothing of the Halt remains. Only the bridge to the station's east, as we have seen, still stands, but bereft of the railway track which once crossed it, which was lifted in 1969. Travelling west by a little over a mile, and remaining on the same line to Wickham and beyond, we encounter the site of a station which in its lifetime bore 2 names. Originally opened as Garsington Bridge Halt in December 1907, the station closed in 1915 as a wartime economy measure. When the station reopened in 1928 as Morris Cowley, it was chiefly at the request of the Morris Motors Company, whose vast manufacturing complex was situated adjacent here in Cowley. The station would not only facilitate the commute of its workers, but it was also adapted and enhanced to manage the movement of cars for export. Whilst passenger traffic diminished and was eventually withdrawn in 1963, this section of line was, and occasionally still is, used for the transport of cars from what is now a BMW production line. 1.5 miles later, the railway gently turns northwest, at which point we reach the site of Littlemore Station. This photograph shows Littlemore to be a neat, immaculately presented station with a good siding at its eastern end. Closed in 1963 and long since demolished, this is approximately the same view today. Occasionally it is reported that this section of line towards Morris Cowley will reopen to passenger services, with the possibility of a station reopening here at Littlemore, but at present this appears to be a distant prospect. Our journey west continues. And 1/2 mile after departing Littlemore, we find Kennington Railway Bridge, where the black-winged swallows haunt the glittering Thames. So we reach our final station on this stretch of line, Iffley Halt. Located in Kennington rather than Iffley, the Halt was to be found at the western end of Kennington Railway Bridge. When the halt was constructed, this was an area of scattered houses and a sparse population. The halt itself is long gone, but was to be found on top of this embankment. It closed in 1915, along with the halts at Garsington Bridge and Horsepath. But unlike these stations, there was to be no second chance for Iffley Halt, which was not reopened. In rediscovering our next station, we join the main line from Didcot to the south, and it is here that we examine the site of Abingdon Road Halt. Situated just north of Kennington Junction, which was our line out to Horsepath Halt, Abingdon Road Halt opened and closed for the same reasons as the other halts we have explored thus far, and like Iffley Halt, it was not reopened. But unlike halts at Iffley and Horsepath, we have here a photograph which gives a reasonable impression of what these halts look like. Designed to be functional rather than resplendent, the platform shelter's pagoda-like roof is a delightful architectural flourish, and one that we will see again on our journey. The scene today is quite different. The line was quadrupled in the early 1940s, and no trace of the station is to be found. We continue north along the main line, but we do not have to travel far to find our last halt to the south of the present-day Oxford station, Hinksey Halt. Matthew Arnold wrote that in the two Hinkseys nothing keeps the same, and so it would seem, for like Abingdon Road Halt, nothing of this station survives, though, in all likelihood, it resembled Abingdon Halt in both style and character. Hinksey Halt closed on the 22nd of March 1915. Viewed from the Devil's Backbone, the area is now home to Hinksey Yard. Before continuing north, we take a brief diversion at what was known as Millstream Junction, a junction because this was in fact the line which took the first trains to Oxford's first station at Grandpont. The line travelled through what is now Hinksey Park, and along what is now Marlborough Road. Opened in 1844, the station proved to be very popular. However, when the Great Western Railway built a through line to Birmingham, today's line through Oxford, passenger workings to Grandpont became impractical. The new Oxford station on the Botley Road opened in 1852, rendering Grandpont largely obsolete, save for some goods traffic. Subsequently, the station was dismantled and the area given over to housing as we see it today. We return to the main line and journey north by 1.5 miles to reach Oxford Station. Opened in 1852, rebuilt in 1971 and again in 1990, it is difficult to describe the station building as anything other than a functional, rather unremarkable affair. Much more striking was the station which once stood next door. Opened a few months before the present Oxford station in May 1851 was Oxford Rewley Road. Originally a terminus for the Buckinghamshire Railway, this company was absorbed by the London and North Western Railway, which in itself became part of the London, Midland and Scottish Railway. From here, one could catch trains to Bletchley, Bedford and Cambridge on the so-called Varsity Line, which is gradually being reinstated. The station was closed to passengers in 1851 and was a commercial premises thereafter. Yet whilst the site is now occupied by the Side Business School, the ending of Oxford Rewley Road Station is not an unhappy one. For the station building was dismantled, moved, reconstructed and refurbished, becoming the main visitor centre for the Buckinghamshire Railway Centre near Quainton. In want of similar attention is Rewley Road Swing Bridge to the north of the station, which carried trains across Sheepwash Channel. A scheduled monument, it has clearly seen better days. Our journey now is the story of two railways serving the north of Oxford, the Great Western Railway and the London and North Western Railway. Both railways shared the alignment for 1.5 miles north of Oxford Station, but not the same track. We shall first look at the London and North Western Railway stations before seeing what remains of those belonging to the Great Western Railway. Originally opened as Summertown in 1906, our next station was renamed Meadow Halt in January 1907. Ultimately closed in 1926, this picture shows that these London and North Western Railway halts were even more Spartan than their Great Western Railway counterparts, consisting of little more than some sleepers raised slightly above the track level. Approximately the same view today. What little there is to see of the site is viewed here from the footbridge which joins Aristotle Lane. The service track to the right of the picture was the trackbed for the London and North Western's rails, which have long since been lifted. Like the Great Western Railway, the London and North Western Railway opened this and a number of other halts on the way to Bicester to compete with the increasing popularity of local bus services. With this in mind, we continue along what were once rails belonging to the London and North Western Railway. We diverge northeast, and in so doing we reach the site of Wolvercot Halt. Opened in 1905 and closed at the same time as Meadow Halt in 1926, it is safe to imagine that the station's construction was no more or less elaborate. If the company was intending to lure suburban passengers, the sight of such halts may well have acted as a deterrent rather than an incentive. Our final London and North Western Railway station is Oxford Road Halt. This charming scene of Oxford Road crossing, which marks the station's site, is a world away from the present day. The quiet gated road has been replaced by a substantial and very busy alternative, which crosses the railway by bridge. Closed in 1926 and demolished in the years following, there is nothing to betray the station's presence. But it is worth noting that whilst Oxford Road Halt was located on the bridge's west side, on its east side is situated Oxford Parkway Station. Opened in October 2015, 89 years after its predecessor's closure, this station offers drivers the opportunity to trade road for rail in an effort to alleviate congestion in the city centre. And indeed, the view from the western end of Platform 1 affords one a view of the site of Oxford Road Halt. We now return to North Oxford to examine the last two remaining Great Western Railway stations on our trip. Just over 2 miles north of Oxford Station was to be found Wolvercot Platform. This is no error in spelling. Opened in 1908 to the north of Godstow Road Bridge, the Great Western Railway dropped the E so passengers would avoid confusing this station with that of the London and North Western Railway's Wolvercot Halt, which we explored earlier in this film. Wolvercot Platform was the first station to have a station mistress, Margaret Elsdon, who later married Mr. Frank Buckingham, who himself was to become station master at Oxford between 1927 and 1941. Let's return to the picture once more, and notice the strange looking carriage occupying the platform. This was in fact called a steam rail motor. They incorporated a steam motor within the body of the carriage, and were designed to be a low-cost alternative to the traditional locomotive, one capable of making frequent stops as befitting suburban services. It was owing to their development that all the halts that we have called at today were built. But just as the rail motor instigated their opening, so their withdrawal was one of the principal reasons for the closure of these halts. Exhibiting poor passenger capacity and proving impractical to service, these unusual locomotives did little to reverse the fortune of the lost stations we have seen in this film. Our final lost station is Yarnton Junction. Opened in 1861, it provided a junction for services on the now lost Witney and Fairford branch, which ultimately closed in 1970. The station was closed to passengers in 1962 and demolished in 1965. Today, there is little to identify the presence of a station here at all. But among the undergrowth, signs of structures and clumps of brickwork, the scattered bones of this station are to be found. And indeed, whilst the station has been swept away, services continue along this line. Whatever the reasons behind their closure, one cannot help but consider how these stations might be of use today, whether they were serving local industry, suburban travel, or journeys nationwide. And in a city which often suffers from congestion and, subsequently, increased pollution, the railway seems to present itself as a possible alternative. So, beneath this mild canopy of English air, our journey exploring the lost stations of this fine city draws to a close. I hope you enjoyed this film. Please subscribe to, share and watch Rediscovering Lost Railways.